What up, Wizards? It's Devin Igby from The Place, and today we're going to space, dude, because Edge of Eternities has been out in paper for a couple of days already, and Standard is already heating up. But just when you thought you knew what decks were good in Standard, turns out you weren't ready at all, because no one expects the Lightstall Inquisition. I was going to use an actual clip from Monty Python there, but YouTube kind of dinged me on that, so I had to come back and re-record the intro. I hope you enjoyed it, but honestly, everyone should expect this guy by now. It's only been a few days, and this is already in a couple of decks. Most notably, the Orzhov or Esper Pixie decks, depending on what they want to do with their mana base. Play the heck out of this guy. They love picking him up and putting him back down because he's super annoying if you do that. But it turns out he's irritating enough if you just resolve him the one time in a game. I mean, she may not look like too much at first glance, I'll give it to you, but neither did like Kitesail Freebooter or Deep-Cavern Bat, and they went on to be some of the best cards in their respective standard environments, and they had kind of bad stat lines for the mana cost, whereas this is just a Savannah Lions with a keyword ability. So even if opponent decides to get smart and cheese you a little bit by putting like a tapped land into exile, you still get a pretty aggressive creature. So at the end of the day, it's every bit as aggro and irritating as your mom's new boyfriend. And more importantly, it reawakens a long dormant and terrifying archetype that we haven't had access to in Standard in a while. If you're brand new, you came in from Final Fantasy, you may not have heard of it. But if you've been around Magic for a little while, you've probably heard the name Orzhov Death and Taxes muttered quietly in some dark corner of your LGS. You don't want to say its name too loud, or it may appear. But apparently somebody somewhere said D and T into a mirror 3 times, and now this card exists. This isn't the only card in Standard that either taxes their resources or punishes them for having more than us. So now I think, especially considering we have a 1-drop like this, we can finally build a deck reminiscent at least of Orzhov Death and Taxes for the first time in a while. But like I said, there's a lot more to the deck than just this card. I feel like I am stalling lightly when it comes to showing you the rest of the deck, but I really wanted to focus on this dude because he's the guy that made me want to play this deck the most. But there's a few new cards from Edge of Eternities in this pile. We'll get to them in a second, but for now I want to move on to the 2 copies of Cecil Dark Knight that we're playing, or Cecil if you want to be that way about it. But either way, I guess this taxes the opponent for putting us at a lower life total. But either way, there are a lot of creatures in this deck for this to give indestructible, and it's fairly easy to flip it over to. I guess what this actually taxes the opponent for at the end of the day is playing any early creature they'd like to attack with, because Cecil is going to definitely kill whatever that thing is 9 times out of 10. But Cecil's also pretty good on offense too. If we can go first and get him on turn 1, he's banging in for a lot of damage. I wanted to have more than one drop in this deck because I think it's important to go ahead and get on the field in mid-range right now. But speaking of play in the field, we also swing a pretty good bat. Deep-Cavern Bat, what a segue. I'm pretty good at YouTube sometimes. Not usually, but still. We're playing 4 copies of this because along with Lightstall Inquisitor, and especially as a turn 1, turn 2 sequence, this can really annoy a lot of opponents. Honestly, it wasn't just Lightstall Inquisitor getting printed that made me want to build this deck. It was the fact that Deep-Cavern Bat already existed and we can curve them into one another on turns 1 and 2. Again, if you want to be the most irritating person in the world, that's probably the best 1-2 in Standard to pull it off. You're just picking apart the opponent's hand, dismantling their plan with efficiency in the earliest turns you could possibly be doing that. And that feels a lot like Orzhov Death and Taxes. Plus, Deep-Cavern Bad is as good as he's ever been. You know what I mean? Maybe it's a lady bat. As good as she's ever been. There's reasons to want to play it in this deck apart from just curving it with Lightstall. And even if you don't get your Lightstall, a turn 2 Deep-Cavern Bad is still a ridiculous card. And sometimes you have the card quality at the 2-drop slot and you just play it. But speaking of that concept, we're also on 4 copies of Voice of Victory in the 2-drop slot. I am a segue machine today, son. Yeah, if you want card quality in the 2-drop slot, I think this thing makes one of the strongest cases in Standard. And if you want a way in which it taxes the opponent, again, you kind of have to look at it sideways, but it does so by forcing them to spend all of their mana on their turn, which is a very real tax on their end. It's also really, really good on turn 3 or 4, say into a Deep-Cavern Bat. If you go Voice of Victory and resolve it, well, now you can play that Deep-Cavern Bat without fear that they'll blow away the Deep-Cavern Bat the moment you play it. So again, a lot of really good good things about Voice of Victory in a deck like this, and it goes on offense particularly well. Plays defense okay with the 3 toughness, but for the most part, you want to keep this on the board, lock in on your turn, and do whatever you want to. Let's get on to the next card, because brothers and sisters, I have come to bring you the good news. Turns out Preacher of the Schism still a good Magic card. Probably not telling you anything you didn't already know. This may not necessarily tax your opponent, but it does give you free stuff, which I guess is the next best thing. Look, Preacher of the Schism is probably the best 3-drop in Standard. There's a few things vying for the throne. You got your Screaming Nemesises and your Kaitos, technically, because you ninjutsu them in for 3. Like, there's definitely some good stuff in the 3-drop slot, but Preacher remains consistently one of the creatures that just about any deck playing Swamps is going to run. There's a reason for that. Drawn cards are good. I like drawn cards, man, but, putting crackback resistant creatures on the table with lifelink is also a pretty sweet deal. Plus, he's got 2 power. That's great. I know it doesn't sound like it's amazing or anything, but we're on 2 copies of Enduring Innocence in this deck because there are 20 total creatures in the list that this triggers. So again, I like to draw cards. So I want our 3-drops to be able to do that for us. We need to bridge the gap in the deck, and we need to be able to catch back up when we start getting low on cards. And both Preacher and especially Innocence are some of the best ways of doing it right now. And this too is just about as good or better than it's ever been before, because sure, it does have to worry about like Torch the Tower right now, but there's plenty of other stuff people are playing that won't exile this, and so you'll get the enchantment version of it if they just use a normal removal spell on it. And that happens, I feel like, a lot more now than it did a couple of months ago. But we're not quite done with 3-drops in the deck, because I'm getting really greedy mana-wise here and playing one of Carsey Revenant in the deck. Mostly against aggro and stuff, but there's plenty of creatures in this thing that you'll be more than happy to throw the flying, lifelink, death touch on once the Revenant is in the graveyard. It's also really good against aggro, and it's kind of important to have another flying creature in the deck for another card that we're playing coming up in just a second. So lots of reasons to kind of shoehorn this in, even though the mana is a little bit weird, but we ended up with like 19 total potential sources of each color of mana in our mana base. So I feel like we can squeeze in like a double white 3-drop and a double black 3-drop in the same deck. We'll have the same problem in our 4-drops, but again, I'm confident that we can get there. Hasn't been a problem mana-wise yet, and I do think it's worth the one of Carsey Revenant. I don't want to play too many more of them in the main deck at least, but is a really good creature for getting in a lot of damage and racing aggro and brick walling aggro some of the time, and even against other mid-range decks, it can get in pretty reliable damage. So again, I'm not packing too many, but I'll take the one of. But moving into them 4-drops, I'm on 2 copies of Beza Bounding Spring. I just don't think that you leave home without this card in the main deck if you have planes anywhere in the list in Standard right now. Just fantastic against aggro decks for catching you back up. You usually get the fish, you usually get the life, and sometimes you'll even get the card depending on what you're playing against. But even if Beza doesn't do like all 3 things in the deck, it'll usually do at least one of those things, and you get a 4 or 5 body at the same time, which is a pretty good deal almost no matter what you're playing against. And if you wanted to get back to the tax theme, I guess, like a way that this taxes the opponent, that one should be obvious, right? They got more guys than you, it gives you some guys. They got more cards than you, give you a card. More life, I get some life. So again, it doesn't necessarily tax them, but it does punish them for having more stuff than you, depending on what that stuff is. So I think it fits the theme nicely, and even if it didn't, I'm playing Beza in my white deck. And in much the same way, if I've got Swamps in my deck, I'm playing Elegy Acolyte nowadays. This is kind of my new favorite card from Edge of Eternities. This thing is a banger, and I do think it's worth splitting some 4-drop slots with Beza and like not playing Overlord of the Mistmoors. Like, there's other 4-drops that you might be interested in playing in this thing, but Elegy Acolyte has done everything for me in the week that I've been messing around with it on Arena. First of all, we played a mono black Aristocrats deck kind of built around this card a little bit on stream the first night of the season and had a great time. Check that video out if you haven't seen it yet, if you want more proof of concept for why this card is actually really good. But in this deck especially, should be obvious that it's phenomenal. We've got a lot of creatures on curve up under it. That's a lot of potential, ways to draw a extra card every turn. Note the way this is worded. You're only drawing 1 extra card a turn. But again, with so many creatures on curve up under it, it's fairly easy to do that, especially alongside Deep-Cavern Bat and the Carsey Revenant. I've actually considered playing like Fairy Dream Thief in this deck to make sure that we draw cards as often as possible. But it's also really easy to hit Void in this deck because we've got like 8+ different removal spells, and hey, we might even lose a guy coming in on combat. I have just like thrown in a Lightstall Inquisitor to combat before more than once playing this deck, just because if they block it, big whoop, maybe it'll trade with something and we'll get a 2/2 at end of turn. So again, I can't really say this taxes your opponent, but it gives you so much stuff that it feels like it's a form of taxation for them, because again, they're not getting quite as much stuff as you. This is a ridiculous mid-range engine that not only draws cards, but puts stuff on the table for you, burying the opponent in value. But let's look at some removal to kind of finish off the main deck here. We're on 2 copies of Seam Rip, like basically everyone else in Standard right now. Turns out the card is very good. The fact that it says non-land permanent, that's wild. You can just take anything out. Let's go. Like, Seam Rip is crazy for just a single white mana, and you should be playing it if you're not. But I'm also on 3 copies of Get Lost in here, just probably the best actual point and click removal spell for just about anything in Standard right now, and gives us a way to cover enchantments and planeswalkers in the main deck. But I'm also on 2 copies of Shoot the Sheriff here, maybe the best point and click black removal spell in Standard, just a peg below Get Lost, and depending on who you talk to, it's actually the better card, but we'll see about that. It's been doing me okay lately, but I'm also on 1 copy of Nowhere to Run in the main deck here for when we run up against those Tifa decks that play Snakeskin Veil and the like. Sometimes it's other versions of that card, but they always have ways of protecting their dudes and making them hexproof or something till end of turn. So Nowhere to Run helps shut all of that down, and you will be very happy at it. You run up against them Tifa piles. But the last card in the main deck is the 2 copies of Duress, because I think it's maybe one of the most important cards in the entire deck. Look, the last like 3 deck techs I feel like we've done on this channel, because for some reason all of our deck techs have swamps in them. It's the last like 3 times I've done a deck tech, I feel like I've talked about how incredible Duress is right now, and we're in a format at the moment that doesn't even have like Corey Steel Cutter in it anymore, but that still doesn't cut down. When we lost off the Beanstalk too, it still doesn't cut down on the number of targets this thing has as early as turn 1. Whether you're getting the removal spell out of their hand, maybe you're getting the protection spell out of their hand against Tifa, so you can actually fire off a Shoot the Sheriff at them or something. Maybe you're getting the Caretaker's Talent out of their hand. Maybe you're getting the Sweeper, right? Maybe you're getting the Simulacrum Synthesizer or the Collector's Cage out of their hand. Maybe you're getting the Kaito out of their hand. There's just so many different things that Duress can grab super early in the game. Agatha's Soul Cauldron this can grab, and the Astrologian's Planisphere. Like, you go on all day, naming stuff that Duress can grab on turn 1 before they've even played a land. Storm Chaser's Talent, right? So again, I think Duress is just one of the best cards in Standard at the moment, and that's not going to change anytime soon. But here are your lands. Again, there's 19 potential sources of each color. I'm counting the Fabled Passage as a source of each color there, but if you feel like that's cheating, there's still 18 sources of each color in this deck, which is more than enough, at least based on the Karsten scale. Again, if you're new around here, I'm sorry, but based on that scale, you typically want 18 sources of a color to cast a 3-drop that has 2 pips of that color in it. Again, we've got at least 18 of both, so I don't feel too bad about playing our 3-drops with double pips in them. The same thing again with our 4-drops. We should have more than enough mana to get to those correctly, but at the same time, this makes me not want to play stuff like Fountain Port in the deck, which would be really good with like the Enduring Innocence, right? Or against Sweepers or whatever. So we do have to make some concessions to make the mana work, but they're concessions I'm fine with. And the Fabled Passage looks like it's putting a tap land in our deck, but it's actually really important on turn 4 to make sure that we either get the extra white mana we need for Beza or the extra black mana we need for Acolyte. Now, looking at our sideboard, we've got a few things in here that are continuations of main deck stuff. We're going to fill out the playset of both Duress, because again, card's great, and Seam Rip, because again, card's great. These will take care of an awful lot of things, especially very early in the game for us. I'll take that. But we're also on a copy of Ghost Vacuum to deal with the graveyard decks, and 1 copy of Kutzel's Flanker to do the same. This can come in against aggro and stuff too if you want to gain some life and maybe make sure that a removal spell's on top with the scries or something, but you mostly play this in tandem with Ghost Vacuum against the different Reanimator decks in Standard. But there's 3 Exercise in here too, because I was going to say you'd be surprised. You probably wouldn't. You played Standard this week. There's a lot of artifacts out there that you got to take care of, but this allows you to take care of a bunch of different permanent types and creatures that get too big, so I'm on 3 copies of that despite the sorcery speed. You'll be happy that you have this too. There's also a copy of Beza in here to make it a 3 of against the aggro decks. There's 2 copies of Nowhere to Run as well. This is great again against the Tifa decks, and you play against those kind of a lot, so you want to pack these. And to finish it off, we're on 2 copies of Elspeth Stormslayer, the most expensive single card in the deck, next to Starting Town, which is $30 for no apparent reason. That card should not be $30. It should be $10 maybe, but either way, Elspeth Stormslayer probably shouldn't be $30 either, but there's Commander players in the world, so that's what that's about. You know, it's also a pretty playable standard card that not only shows up in mono white main decks, but a lot of sideboards of decks that have planes in it. That's because this is a really good late game option. If you're in a game that's going to go long, especially against, like, say, a mono white deck, for instance, this is a great thing to throw down to make sure that you have the same kind of mid-range, you know, value that they have, and they can't go way over the top of you. Now here are your power rankings. A final score of 67, respectable, and most of the categories we have decent scores in. We're not super synergistic. Like, we have a few cards that synergize, but not a whole lot when it really comes down to it. And when it comes to our resiliency, it's probably our weakest point actually. We have some ways of drawing cards, but not enough, and we don't really have any ways of rescuing creatures from the graveyard or anything like that. So if we get hit by a sweeper, we don't even have a fountain port in our mana base. So, you know, I don't love, for the most part, the resilient aspects of the deck, but there are some there. But a deck like this Secret Weapon is always going to be the fact that it has decent offense, you know, 26 creatures or thereabouts, all at good spots on the curve. We can get on board starting on turn 1, and we've got pretty good value for the mana cost at all of our slots. But we've also got a fantastic removal suite in this deck. Just the best removal spells in Standard belong to us and us specifically, so that makes for a good defense. And again, that is always the secret sauce to a deck like this. Are we a good mid-range deck? Well, kind of wish we had some of the same engines that allow other mid-range decks to go way over the top in the late game. We don't have those, so we're kind of a tempo deck that's also kind of a mid-range deck that's also kind of an aggro deck, like Death and Taxes has always been. But you combine this efficient removal with these efficient creatures, and you will find yourself with a good package every time. Now, to try and prove that, let's look at a couple of example games here. This first one, against a sort of mono-red brew, we go ahead and throw down a Cecil Dark Knight on turn 1 as we go first, and they get a harried Spear Guard. Pretty cool little guy. They'll block Cecil with their Spear Guard coming in. We go to 18 and they get a rat. Seems like a good deal for them, so we'll duress them and actually end up with nothing to choose as they have nothing but dudes in their hand. So we throw down Lightstall Inquisitor here on turn 2 to go with the duress, and they are going to get a tapped mountain this turn because of that play. That does mean they can still throw down Fanatical Firebrand and trade it with our Inquisitor, which we're fine with, and then they'll bang in with the rat. We get Godless Shrine tapped into a Voice of Victory, so let's get in with the Cecil. They'll go to 18. We'll go to 15. Still lower a life total than them, but we're okay with that. They get Charming Scoundrel this turn, make it a 2/2, and get in with both guys. So we will block the rat with the Voice of Victory. They have Felonious Rage here. Again, pretty good play on their end. We lose our voice. They get a 2/2. So on our turn, we'll rip off this Seam Rip and hit their Charming Scoundrel, take a damage from the Wicked token, get in with the Cecil, thus flipping it. Good reason to have taken the shot from the token, right? But we now have an untapped 4/4 lifelink. They get Summon Brunhilde number 1 into Summon Brunhilde number 2. So we shoot the Sheriff the first Brunhilde, let them have the second one, and they'll end up saying go. We get down Concealed Courtyard and then offer a trade with the Cecil, which they will take all day. Yes, sir, thank you very much. They draw, play land, say go. We get to play Elegy Acolyte, and it turns out they don't want to play against that card, so they scoop it up. Now here in game 2, our opponent goes first. We won't be so lucky this time, and we're up against the Terminatostron. That sounds pretty intimidating. They get Starting Town into Cenite Scout turn 1 and reveal Breakout, so it looks like we're in an Orzhov or Gruul Delirium kind of party here. We get Lightstall on turn 1, and they'll end up putting a Violent Urge into exile. Pretty good pull on that one. They get Thornspire Verge into Breakout, and actually whiff. They end up putting Screaming Nemesis into their hand for the next turn, getting in with the Scout. We'll let him on in. We get a Bleachbone Verge down this turn into Seam Rip on the Cenotay Scout. Not bad. Get in with our Lightstall Inquisitor. This turn, they're going to throw down that Screaming Nemesis that they worked so hard for last turn with the Breakout. Get in. We'll let them have that damage. So we throw down third land on our turn, and we're just going to hold up the Shoot the Sheriff, get in with our Lightstall Inquisitor, put them at 14, wait to see what they do next. They will resolve Breakout and end up getting a FOMO off of it. Not too bad. They draw, and then they discard, and they'll get to get in with both creatures this turn. Again, not too shabby. There's 2 cards for Delirium and Graveyard for fear of missing out. We'll shoot the Sheriff, the Screaming Nemesis in this case, and take a couple of points of damage. Don't want to trade the Lightstall just yet. So on our next turn, we're going to draw a Beza the Bounding Spring. Not too bad. It's not going to get us much when we throw it down, but we'll get him with our Lightstall, put him at 11, and throw down Beza anyway, because a 4/5 body seems pretty good against a 2/3 body. Now we say go, and they're going to play another FOMO on their turn. They're going to draw, and then go ahead and discard. They play Wildfire Wickerfolk after that, and then say go rather than get into us. We're going to go ahead and bang in with the Beza. They don't block it, and they end up at 5. Then we can double spell Preacher of the Schism into Voice of Victory, and they see the writing on the wall, but not before they go ahead and Violent Urge their Wildfire Wickerfolk and decide to go ahead and get in as well. I was a little bit surprised on the timing with the Violent Urge here, but either way, we have blocks no matter what they end up doing, and we have them dead on board next turn, so they're going to end up scooping. Good game, opponents, but that is all for this one. Let me know how you felt about it down there, because there are a few, like, taxi creatures that I kind of left out of this one. So if there's anything that you'd rather see played in this deck, then I'm all ears. I want to know how you'd build the thing. But that is just one of the decks that I want to do in this format. There's a lot of stuff that I want to get to in this format, including a 5 decks for $5. I have gotten no less than 3 emails already in the first week of the season that are all like, please do a 5 for 5 for EoE. So I guess we got to get that done. But, you know, I want to do Tannic Red. I want to do the Black-White Aristocrats deck. There's a lot I want to get to. And if you're watching this in the next couple hours, at the very least, after I get this uploaded, I should have a Patreon post up for the next deck tech this season. So if you want to vote on what we do next here on the channel for EoE Standard, go on over to the Patreon, link in the description, or you can post it into your address bar and go there that way, whatever you want to do, and throw in $1 a month and you can vote on what we do around here. Affect the course of YouTube history itself. But anyway, y'all, that's all I've got for this one. Hit me up in the comments with all your thoughts, concerns, questions, and other things that you might want to do with this deck. And let me know how you did with it if you get to draft it up on the arena, right? But apart from that, do all the YouTube stuff on your way out. Hit the button shaped like a thumb, sub to the sandwich, trying to get to 150K. You guys are getting us closer every day. Appreciate all the new subs around here. It means a lot to me. Again, if you're brand new from Final Fantasy or something, thanks for joining the squad, man. I'm glad that you found me. I hope to be a good source for you. But anyway, y'all, we got Spider-Man spoilers coming up too. Lots of reasons to sub if you haven't done it yet. But anyway, do all the things, and I will catch you cats later. I'm Dev from the Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love, and be kind.